If you check the Facebook.
I'm checking Facebook, nothing there is yet. Okay, yeah, it's live now.
Okay, let me just check.
Yep, it is live now. No.
There's an old text saying Intel Inside ED. That's an old YouTube one going on. I think we're live on YouTube.
Yep, we're live everywhere.
Okay, we're live everywhere. We have the text. Surinder, over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the TSPP live event. Today, we're going to have Dil Gujral talking about Party Wall Awards, and I will let Dil introduce himself. Thank you, Dil.
Thank you, Surinder. Got to get my background right. So it's great to be on the other side for once. Well, I'm not sure about that. Depends how that goes. I'm feeling slightly nervous. Right. So before we start talking about party walls, I've got a little presentation from Ranjit's son, Jeevan. And I thought it was really great. So it's really worth sharing, and just going to go through a little, discuss this little challenge Jeevan's doing. It's called a Million Step Challenge, Diabetes UK 2021. And if you go to the Facebook, you see my family story on it, and it's not going to go into it right now, but it's a fantastic challenge. He's the one walking 1 million steps. And look, during the lockdown, this is the biggest lesson I like to share with everyone. It's what I call the three currencies of the digital age. Everyone focuses on money, but there are two other currencies that are more important. You've got time, which everyone wastes, including me, especially me sometimes, and attention. And we're not all very focused on what we should be focused on. So look, a couple of minutes of your time, a little bit of your attention before we start the formal presentation. And I'm going to run through something that I think is really interesting and important to know. This is Professor Vallabhji. He treated my dad in St. Mary's. He's in charge of Diabetes UK. I had a really interesting conversation, and it's regarding this chap's book, Dr. Michael Mosley. It's called The 800 Calorie Fast. And unfortunately for my father, it was too late when he came across this accidentally, but it actually is a thing. Apparently it's known about in some medical circles where you go on an 800 calorie fast for 8 to 12 weeks, at least type 2 diabetes, your body reboots and you can get rid of type 2 diabetes. So if you take away nothing else from this entire show, please pass this on to your family, relatives, and anybody who's in danger of doing diabetes. This is obviously not a health show, but it's important. You know, if you meet me socially and I get a little bit chatty, I used to be smug about my marathon in 2018. I'm going to try and be a little bit less smug. What Jeevan is doing the equivalent, and I asked him, and this is why I realized what it is. He's actually doing the equivalent of 19 marathons or 500 miles, which is Land's End to John O'Groats. So, yeah, when I get smug talking about my marathon, just remind me of Jeevan's challenge. Super great challenge. And look, last year's period, we all went through stressful times, and we're all thanking the NHS. I believe the best way to thank the NHS is to look after our health and stay away from them, believe it or not. And I'm sure they'll agree. We're on a program discussing wealth and property. The one thing I truly believe is your health is your most important aspect of your wealth. So please invest in your health, educate yourself, and support this fantastic challenge. Look, when Jeevan told me about it, I said, look, I'll donate some books. So if you'd like some books, this is, ironically, it's my book that Ranjit talks about. So you can buy it on Amazon, but if you give him a donation and send him an email, these details will be in the links below. He'll send you a paper book, or you can have an ebook or an audio version, whatever, which one you want. When I got home that evening, I thought, look, can I do a little bit more? So I've also got a CPD training on party walls. This is for professionals. It's 3 hours CPD training. Eventually, when it goes on, it's due to go on sale very, very shortly. It's $199. But donate whatever you can, and you can get this online training. Again, it's something interesting that I managed to do through this lockdown. So, and finally, I thought, can I take more action on this? And this is something I've really enjoyed doing this. Well, enjoyed as far as we can through this lockdown. Is we managed to create this program on how to create digital content, and it's for people in professional services, coaching and training businesses. And the guys who are hosting my training, CVS Systems, have put together this training. It's going to be launching in January 2022, next year. The price is to be confirmed, but the coaching program is about £600 roughly. That's what I'm going to be charging them. I've got a suggested minimum donation of £100, and there's only 50 places. That's all I can do. And I'll take you through 2 lots of coaching calls. I think this is a really great program. It's basically all the lessons I've learned and how to do things a lot quicker and faster. And I'll try not to talk about party walls on this training. And it's actually all the lessons I learned while putting together my online program. So there's 50 places available. Grab one, highly discounted price. You'll get through the beta versions. You'll get extra help. And when we do launch the final program, you'll get another round of coaching sessions on there. So it's a great little offer, and we're just pledging this to charity just to help Jeevan do his stuff. And finally, Jeevan, look, during our stuff in life and our roles, we all come across a lot of millionaires. I think you'll be one of the best millionaires I can hope to know by doing this challenge. So Jeevan, well done. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for raising awareness. And for all our audience, thank you. And please take action. Donate whatever you can. It's a really great cause. Again, if you take away nothing else, look into the health aspect. Surinder, is that okay? Would you mind putting a link on the stuff? And
I'll put this on our Facebook page, the full details and everything else.
Fantastic. Obviously, we've all got relatives that are affected by this, and as I said, I think the best way to help the NHS is, at least for this bit, stay out of their way and look after ourselves.
Sure. I think it's a very, 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 very worthy cause. Please all get together and see how much we can raise for the diabetes charity.
Great. No, thank you for that. So, business at hand, I guess.
That's right.
You'd like me to say a word or two about Party Wall Act?
Well, more than word or two.
Okay, let's see what I can do. I'll try not to disappoint you. In fact, the problem might be the other way around, keeping me quiet about it. Right. So, over the last 18 months lockdown, I've been experimenting with all of this. Hang on, I don't think I've slide shared yet. So, obviously not enough practice in the last 18 months. Still mucking up the Zooms. So look, over the last 18 months, I've done various presentations on Facebook, YouTube. Going forward, I will be putting my regular content on YouTube, and that's our YouTube channel, 1996 Party Wall. So go there, see all the presentations. We're going to try and do little and often presentations because they're easier to absorb. But today I'm going to try and give you some extra stuff and try and give out as much as I can in the time available. So let's go. My name's Dil Gujral. I'm the Chief Surveyor at 1996 Party Wall. And I talk about party walls usually on property stuff. So this is a government booklet. I've been looking at this intensively over the last year. And you can download this from the internet. This is the address. They've changed the address slightly. Over the last year, they changed this booklet around. So what they actually did was quite cheeky. It used to be a red booklet. They changed the cover. They changed this logo, but they didn't change anything else. And I was a bit upset at that, actually. But then I thought, let's give them a hand and write this up for them. Okay. So, hang on a minute. I think I've got the wrong presentation up. Anyway, go. Yeah, sorry. One second, guys. I've actually got the wrong one up. Let me make sure I get the right one. No, it's still the wrong one. Damn. All right, I'm going to have to run with this one. So, in the booklet, it's great for the explaining the act, the definitions, and it's got great diagrams. However, it doesn't explain the process fully. So what we've done is we've created a booklet, and the thinking is the government's busy. They've got all sorts of things to sort out, petrol stations and all of this. So we thought we'd give them a hand and create this booklet. So you'll be able to get a hold of this, and it's got a sample of all the notices. Right. So the first thing to talk about is who should be taking an interest in the Party Wall Act. If you're an architect or a construction professional that deals with construction matters, you should really be pay sharp attention to this, even if you don't deal with it. I've just had a call literally before the program about something I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is the 10-4 process. And the chap was asking, what do we do? And I had to ask him, have you sent, sorry, I've closed the wrong slide. I've actually closed the slides down. So give me 1 sec, I'll get those up. This chap was actually asking, what do we do? And they've sent a notice. And part of the reason that happens a lot is, let's get this one up. Right. It's because that government booklet was written for a different time. It was written in 2001, 2002, and it doesn't go through all the stuff that it should do. I'm going to stop blaming them for doing it wrong and try and help them put it right. Okay, so from the beginning, right? Let me make sure I share. See, it's not so easy at this end as I usually think, so I'm going to give my guests less of a hard time next time. So there's the booklet, there's the checklist, and in there we talk about the 10-4 process. These are the example notices, and they're a simplified version in the booklet we produced. I always have a little giggle when I come across the ones that people try and use from the government booklet, because they tend to, it's so complex, people can't work out where to insert stuff. So we've done them in three. These are the only three notices you need to be aware of. They're very simple to do, and you just use the ones that you need to. Word of warning, Section 2 notice template is what they use for Section 3 works. And it's used for both loft and chimney works together. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so if you're a construction professional, you should know about this stuff. It's important. If you're a developer, and by a developer, it could be anybody that develops property professionally, ranging from refurbing a single house, so people buy houses, refurb and sell, or someone doing massive construction projects. You need to be aware of this, the timelines and what impact it can have. Also, and I remember talking about this on a presentation I did about a year before the lockdown, so you can imagine how long ago. And people used to look at me and saying, what are you talking about? At that point, I used to say, well, finance guys and development finance people, bridging and development finance guys are going to get interested in this because the impact it has on their clients being able to return loans. And it's coming true. Where increasingly people who've got projects, their finance guys are asking for, have you got Party Wall? They're asking for our PI. They're asking for various questions relating to Party Wall. So just, you should be aware of that. And again, if you're a property manager, you're looking after someone's portfolio, or estate agent, or looking after investors' portfolio, it affects you as a joining owner because you're being sent notices from the next door doing works. A lot of the time, these are going in the bin, so you also need to be aware of that. So just make sure you're aware. And I guess most importantly of all, as the homeowners who are doing extensions to their home, and we had a lot of this in last year lockdown where people literally had scaffolding up, they're ready to go, and they couldn't work out the next steps. And there was a particular case in Hounslow, and the lady said, look, what do I do? I said, well, you've actually got to restart and go through it again. And you know, she was saying, look, it's horrible. We're locked in. Both of us having to work from home. Apparently, that's quite an ordeal if you're not used to working from home. And we can't get our work started. All we want is a little bit of extra office space in our loft. Funnily enough, it was something we were able to help her. It was, I don't think we charged her anything for it in the end, but it was one of the projects that I felt really happy that I could help someone with. So now, why do you want to undertake the party wall process? So first of all, it's the law. So you have to be compliant. Secondly, you get a chance to do a schedule of condition on your neighbor's property as part of the process, which means, and we've done this, we've gone into neighboring properties to do surveys and we've seen cracks in the wall. And we've been so astounded at these cracks, we thought, have they actually done the works next door? Because it looks as if that crack would appear exactly had the works gone wrong. So, and in those cases, you get false and malicious claims from next door's neighbours who are just trying it on, basically. And so that you're protected from that. It's very much like when you go to rent a car, they'll take photographs of your car before the works begin, so that when the works are completed, you can compare, and if the damage is already existing, you'll say, it's already there. Okay, so I've had this a lot, and I really want to avoid this, where your projects get stopped midstream and you can't proceed until it's completed. And some of the times we've had people sitting in their homes with the roof off, daily phone calls. So please avoid this. This is rubbish, both for you as someone trying to get your works done, and even worse for me, because I'm thinking, well, how else can I get it done quicker? Now, going back to the point on the law, it is the law. It's your responsibility as a building owner. It's not the architect's responsibility. It's not the builder's. It's your personal responsibility as a property owner. And the penultimate point I'd make is, if it goes to court, there's legal action involved. You're still going to have to do I was going to be a bit rude there. You're still going to have to do the party wall process. And it's going to cost you extra. You're going to end up bearing most of the legal costs. So why not just do it right in the first place? So avoid the legal costs. And it's increasingly, there's more and more law cases on it. And just to round off, it is legal requirements, so make sure you do it. Okay, so we'll put together this booklet. And if you're living in a semi or a terrace and you've got house next door, and on the other side of, say, a driveway, it's within 3 meters. So sometimes you have a shared driveway, two semis share a driveway, so it's less than 3 meters. And here you're doing a rear extension. They're actually also notifiable. So it works for this sort of setup. And the one thing people forget is, if you're digging within 3 meters and you're going below the depth of their foundation, it's notifiable. Now, the other scenario it's also notifiable is if you're doing a rear extension, you're in a semi, so obviously the one next to you is going to be notifiable, they're within 3 meters. But if you've got your own driveways and there's a detached house and it's more than 3 meters away, they're not going to be notifiable unless you're doing a basement. So in that scenario, yes, you can use our little booklet for that as well. All the notices work fine. Don't forget, if you're doing a loft, the semi or the house on the other side of the drive is not notifiable. We're increasingly seeing houses that have been converted into flats that are now looking to do rear extensions or loft conversions. Now, in this scenario, if they're doing a rear extension, the house next door is going to be notifiable. on the other side of the driveway, only if it's within 3 meters is going to be notifiable. Now, the reason I put a question mark here is you need to understand your freeholders and what do they call it? Consent to extend. So it gets a bit more complex here. So although technically the notices work, you need to understand what you're doing. For example, the loft conversion, you don't have right to put scaffolding on the ground floor flats land. But if you can get freeholder consent and wrap up the scaffolding consent within that, you'll be able to achieve that. So I would say if you live in a house that's been converted into flats and you're doing an extension, you need to get advice. The government booklet's definitely not going to handle it. I would hesitate to use ours before this, right? And the other scenario I'll put down is if you've got a house, it'll still work with the house next door, but if you've got flats on the other side, now whether that's a house that's been converted or say a commercial property that's flats and you're doing anything to the party wall, so loft would contain that, come into that remit. And next door you've got a setup where you've got say 3 flats. Don't do the notices yourself. It's just too complex. Don't get yourself into trouble. It's not going to work for you. You're going to create more problems than you're going to solve. So these are the things I'm going to be discussing on our YouTube channel. Have you got any questions for me, Surinder? Surinder, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, the question is that where do we find who the notifiable leaseholders are? You talked about the flats and things. And
yes. So,
and do they all have to be notified, all 3 of them, or just all 3, 4, whatever they are, or just the ground floor one?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I'm going to take you back to this diagram if I can. So yeah, the leaseholders you'll have to look up on land registry, okay. But be aware of this, and you'll understand this. So with flats, they're often have 99-year leases, so they get registered. But with commercial property and say commercial tenants where they've got, so you've got a case where houses are leased out to housing associations and they have a lease of 3 or 5 years. You don't need to register leases under 7 years on land registry. So those will be missing. And there's almost no answer for that element. You just have to serve the notice and let the freeholder tell you. So there is a blind spot, if you like, and you have to be aware of that. So it's a really great question.
So what you're saying is that you inform the freeholder. Yeah. And he in turn has to inform or let you know who the leaseholders are.
Well, there's no duty, and usually they come forward and they say this is a leaseholder, but sometimes they ignore the letters as well. So there's, you could face a prospect that they wake up once you're doing the works. That occasionally does happen. There is a little blind spot there. So it's a really interesting question.
So who carries the can if they wake up a little later?
Well, you as a building owner carries the can, but you do have an argument saying, I've done everything in the process. They're not registered in terms of the lease being registered on the land registry.
Right. And
if you've done your notifiable works, you've got an argument saying, well, there's nothing more for me to do in that scenario.
Okay.
It's quite rare that happens, but you do need to be aware of it.
So that's a big that only involves if it's short leases, either to residential or commercial.
Yeah. So if you've got shop owners next door to you, you know they're going to have short leases. You know they're going to have commercial leases that may not be registered. So in that case, it's worth knocking on the door and finding out.
Okay. Right.
And any other questions?
That's fine. I mean, if you what happens if the neighbor does not reply?
Yeah, I'm going to come on to that later on. So let me carry on with a little bit more. And yes, great question. Let's go through it, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So back on that. So now, because over the last year I've been doing these presentations on and off on my channel and Facebook, and I'll do them more regularly. It just struck me, how can people improve the process and try and get a better result for themselves, i.e. more likely to gain a consent? And this is more aimed at construction professionals. Yeah. So there are three types of, I was going to say architects, but all sorts of construction professionals. They don't actually understand the act fully because things are complex. Nobody understands stuff outside their area, so I'm not blaming them. You'll get the guys who'll bury their head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. And it's happening less and less now, I've got to admit. You'll get the guys who'll do your loft plans and will maybe try and be helpful. They'll give you a notice that they've drafted or copy-pasted. So they'll say, here, serve this to your neighbors. You're sitting there going, this looks like double Dutch. What do I do with this? And it's very much like this lady throwing an axe at a partner. You don't actually know what you're doing. And then you'll also get the third type, which are professionals that are helpful. But I think they're missing a trick. And this is what I'd really like to share with you. I think this is a trick that we've almost developed by doing so many notices. So just to recap, if you're in the construction industry, tell your clients, they need to know, need to understand, don't hide it from them. Make sure you get the adjoining owner details from land registry, as we said previously. Don't draft the notices and run away and say you serve it. So you're better off, in fact, not doing nothing, in fact, doing nothing and saying you need to get someone else to do it. And they also need to understand the 10-4 process. This is where I think you asked the question about what happens if nobody replies. So I'm going to come on to that shortly. That's very important to understand. Make sure you complete the process. So that's about the 10-4. If you get a no reply, you've got to send them a reminder letter. And then if there's still no reply, you appoint a surveyor on their behalf. The Act changed from the London 39 Building Act, and I know I joke that I've got a few white hairs, but I wasn't around in 1939. I don't think you were either, Surinder. So it changed where you couldn't carry on once you give a notice, and that initially when there was a transition period, everyone was confused, but there's no excuse for it now. And this is my favorite bugbear. So people will get the government booklet, fill in the details, and they'll put it in the neighbour's letterbox, or send them a recorded delivery, or there's another one that I've recently noticed. They're being over helpful. They're finding out where the landlord lives and sending them the notice. All of those three are actually technically wrong. They don't count for anything. What they need to do is find out the official addresses, send it as a certificate of posting, and that's it. So you've got things that are not enough and things that are being overdone. And you need to understand the correct process. And back on this 10-4 process, there's a really great video on our YouTube channel, which I'll try and link across, where it shows the 4 processes, and I'll try and go through it if we've got enough time today. Basically, it's a bit like legal representation when you're doing a property transaction. You need to appoint a surveyor on their behalf, so they're sort of represented, and they can't come back and say, well, you didn't do a party wall notice or you didn't complete the process. So those are the top 7 mistakes we see going on. Now, here's an add-on that I'm going to make. This is the normal process. So people put in for a planning application, and this works. I'm going to come to this in a minute. They'll then, once the application goes through, they'll start the party wall process. So there's a way of improving that. So, but before I talk about that, I'm going to just fill this in. This is what we call unsolicited approaches. As soon as you put this application in, if you put in a planning application on Monday, by Friday, your neighbors would have received, I would say, anywhere between 10 to 16 letters saying, you need to appoint a party wall surveyor, use our services. And this is why neighbors end up appointing surveyors that they didn't intend to, because they're sitting, your neighbor's sitting there saying, well, they didn't tell us, there's something wrong. What are they trying to hide from us? We better look after our interests and appoint these nice chaps who've sent us a letter. All they're doing is they're costing you, they're going to cost you more money as someone doing works. So this is the thing about unsolicited approaches. They're not illegal. Nobody likes them in the industry, but they are legal. And there was a whole thing about GDPR breaking out, whether they could still carry on doing it. They are legally allowed to do it. So I just thought I'd bring that in. And I think this is a strategy for getting around that. So as soon as you've got some sort of scheme ready, and this works really well with permitted development. So things like rear extensions, loft conversions, outhouses, this is really great strategy. It's going to come under PD, which means you're going to get it. You have a right to do it. So as soon as your architects drafted the first draft, start the party wall process. Send the notices, do a certificate of posting in the correct format, and then finish off doing your planning application, submit it, let it run. And in the meantime, the party wall process has started and it's running. Which means, and I'm going to draw your attention to this. This is another thing I discovered during the lockdown, actually. I got asked an awkward question and I asked the barrister this, and the barrister's reply was quite funny as well. I'm quite friendly with this chap, and he said, look, actually, I didn't realize this until I looked into it. And this is why I put this up on the screen. And it's back end of section 1012C, and last bit of the paragraph says, unless the adjoining owner says they can decrease the notice in writing, the notice has to stay, which means for a loft conversion, you have to wait 2 months. So this is another thing, another reason to get this process started quicker. So I hope that's useful, and that works for PD. There's a separate strategy for planning. I'm not going to go into it now. I think I'm going to take a pause there, see if we've got any more questions, Rinda.
Yeah, just 1 minute. We do have them. Who pays for the notices, and can I use free notices and templates available on the internet?
Yeah. So you as a building owner have to pay for not only the notices, the party wall awards, and in most cases, if you're doing a loft or a rear extension, you'd end up having to pay for the neighbour surveyors as well. You can use free versions. Don't use the government template. It's just going to be rubbish. Sorry, let me be a bit more diplomatic. It'll probably cause you problems. So we've created a free version. We've actually got a checklist of what to go through. If it's okay, Surinder, I'll share that with you later on, and you can put it on the. All
right.
Yep.
Yeah. Before we move on, I have another question.
Yeah.
You said that if you can appoint, if you get no replies, you can appoint a surveyor, a party wall surveyor for your neighbor.
Yeah,
right.
You should do. Yeah.
Okay. What happens if he doesn't get access to the property?
Yeah, that's a really good question. All he can do is he can write and request access. If he doesn't get access, you then proceed with the process. You write an award, which is a legal agreement. And in there, you have to state that the access was not granted.
So that's the surveyor's job, not my job, not the owner's job.
No, once surveyors are appointed, both the owners are out of the picture. And it's a little bit weird, and I've got to explain this, and the lawyers hate me for this, because I've had to deal with several lawyers who try and boss me around, and I say, in the end, I have to say, look, as a building owner or adjoining owner, I have to listen to your concerns, but I have to carry this role out in a statutory function. It's a bit like being a court officer. You're not beholden to your owners. You have to do the right thing.
Right.
And even this morning, I had an interesting conversation with a counterparty. He was actually a building owner and I'm the adjoining owner somewhere. And he was more than a little bit harsh on his owners because they haven't done the drawings properly. And so you can get back to your question in terms of surveyors. Yeah, they're not answerable to the owners, but they have to follow a process. So they would write to them. Go on.
You mentioned that owners haven't done their drawings. What drawings do they have to do? It's my job to do the drawings.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it was the architect's job and the engineer's job. It's obviously building owners or homeowners are not going to sit there and do their own drawings. Very rarely, no. Right? So they appoint architects and engineers to do it. So in this case, in my opinion, they'd overspec this rear extension, and they hadn't paid attention to what they were doing. It's one of these companies that churns out extensions and lofts, and they've just thrown a pan. And when I said to the other surveyor, I think they've overcomplexed this. He saw what I was talking about, and he said, "Look, you were totally right. I'm going to have a go at it," and he could see my point. So you as a homeowner, although you're not going to do the actual drawings, you sort of still have overarching responsibility, and that's how the law goes. It sort of stays with you and says you're still responsible, but you obviously have to delegate duties out and delegate it to a competent person. Hopefully, they don't always. Okay. Yeah.
And can the neighbor appoint the same surveyor as yourself as the owner?
Yeah, yes, that's a really good question. It's a really good point, in fact. And this is almost my favorite bugbear. So imagine the 39 Act, and the 1939 Act was focused around the 8 inner city boroughs. And then someone had a bright idea of creating the Party Wall Act, 1996, which came into force 1st of July. In fact, what's the guy's name? He's actually a surveyor. He's Lord, I forget the guy's name. I know the guy, sorry, name escapes me. So he brought about a bill in the House of Lords, Parliament. They were going to extend it to England and Wales. And primary reason was, at that point, everybody started doing rear extensions, loft conversions, and neighbours started to have arguments. And they were going to end up in court suing each other or having property and boundary disputes. So to stop this, they created a piece of legislation called the 96 Act, which actually comes from the old 1939 Building Control Act, London Building Act. And that's where all our planning legislation, building control started from. But they left out party wall element until 1997. Anyway, so when they were putting this legislation through Parliament, some of the barristers have read around it, have read Hansard's and said, it was thought that neighbours would appoint an agreed surveyor for stuff like rear extensions, loft conversions, taking chimneys out. So yes, sorry, let me answer it. Yes, you can, and in fact, it's usual to do that until you mess up the communication with your neighbours, and that goes back to my previous point. Tell them about it before you put your PD developments in. Now, what will happen is if you tell them about it before you put your PD planning application in, they're then going to get these letters and say, yeah, we know, we're expecting this, we understand this. Whereas if they get those letters first, and then you walk up with the notice, they're going to think, well, you've been trying to hide something from us. So you're more likely to get consent or agreement to use the same surveyor if you preempt all these letters coming through their letterbox. And obviously, if you've got an agreed surveyor, it's just one lot of surveyor's costs. Whereas if each side has their own surveyor, you're going to pay for their surveyor most 99.9% of the cases. And in fact, we we find our workload triples when you've got, sorry, I've got to admit someone. Let me get them in. We find that our workload doubles or triples if we've got another surveyor, because there's a lot of back and forth. The only time we're not allowed to act as an agreed surveyor is where they're doing basements or where there's commercial works.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. So you answered the second part of my question, which was the cost. How can a single surveyor be independent to both parties?
Yeah, good question. So let me put it this way. You're obviously not 21, Surinder, if you don't mind me saying.
Oh, well, no, I'm not yet 21.
Not yet 21, right. So you might remember the time when you took out a mortgage, your solicitor acted for you and the mortgage company had a separate solicitor. Yeah. That used to be the case at some time ago. And then they decided, well, one solicitor can act for both parties, the mortgage and the mortgagee. It's a similar principle here. We're allowed to act for both parties within certain restrictions, certain types of projects. So simple stuff like rear extensions, loft conversions, taking chimneys out and outhouses, we're allowed to act for both parties. Our guidance is, if it's basement work, don't do it, because it just gets much more complex.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on.
Yeah. So you're going to invite us to your 21st birthday whenever that happens.
Okay, I'll invite you.
Fantastic, and rest of the viewers. So
yeah,
yeah, great. So enough about Surinder's youthfulness. I thought we'd discuss this Party Wall Offices, Party Wall Act, and the implications. And this is one of the diagrams you'll see in the notices we'll put together. The most common type of works are rear extensions, loft conversions, porches and outhouses, not so much. And outhouses you need to be careful of. And I've drawn a line around this bit because I'm going back to those section numbers that I showed you earlier. So most common ones are section 6.1. 6.2 is very rarely used, unless you're doing a basement or you've got an incline in your house at the back. Hardly ever used. For loft conversions, it's section 2/3. And the next box that should pop up, or that doesn't pop up on this one at the moment, is chimneys. So if you're removing chimneys, you need to notify your neighbor. Now, if you're taking out chimney breast, that's the bit below the roof line. That is the most, how do I phrase this politely? That's the works that are likely to cause the most likely to cause problems with your neighbors, most likelihood of damage. So we always get, you don't need to do party wall notice for chimneys, you can do them. No, you actually can't. They're notifiable works that they're in fact 2 months notice period, as it says here. If you don't get consent, if you send a notice, they're automatic dissent. So, sorry, Surinder, just to go back on one of your questions, if you send a notice and they don't reply, it's what we call an automatic dissent. However, there's section 1 notices, which are mainly used for putting up fences or short walls. That's basically when you're building on the line of junction. In those scenarios, if you don't get a reply, that's deemed consent and you can carry on. So this is where consent and dissent come from. Now, dissent doesn't mean you're going to have an argument with your neighbor or you're going to get, and there's another term that's used that winds everybody up, and they call it a dispute. Dispute simply means it's something that the surveyors have to decide. Yeah, is that helpful, Surinder?
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to go through this little process diagram, if you like. This is where stage 1 is started by the building owner. So if I'm here and I want to put an extension on the back of my home office will put an outbuilding and it's notifiable, I'm going to send the neighbours a notice. This is stage one. This is not a party wall agreement. So I'll often get calls from people saying, we sent our neighbours a party wall agreement and they refuse to sign it. It's incorrect terminology. What you're doing is you're sending a notice to them. This is a two-stage process. It's very much like lease extensions, similar principle. So I send the notice, and stage two depends on how the neighbours reply. And it's decided by the neighbours. They can ask for a schedule of condition survey, which is very much like when you rent a car before you take it out, they'll do photographs of the car and say, and then when you bring it back, like Jordan Belfort did to his white Ferrari, I was watching that film recently, when he gets out the country club, they'll say, no, Mr. Gujral, when you took it away, it was pristine condition. You've done some stuff to it. Or the opposite, which is what happens a lot of the time. We'll go in there and we'll photograph existing damage. And then when people show up and said, in fact, this is really funny. I did a job in Isleworth. The neighbour sent a photograph to the building owner. And if you go in a lot of lofts, you'll see there's a brick missing near the chimney, top right or top left quadrant. There's a little brick that is actually missing out of most houses. We notice this quite often. It's probably their form of putting up scaffolding when they built those houses. So the neighbour sent us a photo saying there's a brick missing. And at that point, I looked at it, I thought, that's strange. And I dug the photographs that we took at that point, and it was the same brick missing on the other side. I said, well, it was missing when we started. So it's really funny in terms of protecting people from malicious claims. This thing went on for ages. They also had some various other stuff going on. There was a cracked tile on the roof. We'd actually caught the photograph of it. So a schedule of condition, going back to the point, actually protects me as a building owner who's going to do works from damage that already exists. Now, the other thing that neighbours can ask for is a party wall award. And that's what that's what you could call a party wall agreement. So that's a legal document, and it sets out my rights and my responsibilities. So I have the right to do the works, but I also have a responsibility to make good the damage. And what happens if there's damage? There's also a procedure in there. So this is my favorite diagram, and you could see this on my YouTube channel. One of our guests, in fact, created that. He was on some time ago last year, and I tidied it up for him. So when you send a notice, they can consent with a schedule of condition, and in which case, for that part of your project, you're good to go. And don't forget, each owner can do a different number of things. They can also reply, and it's called dissent, actually, to the party wall notice. They can either appoint an agreed surveyor. So if we're allowed to accept it, we can act as the same surveyor for both sides, or they can appoint their own surveyor. Now, for residential purposes, the output is almost exactly the same, very little difference in it. You get a schedule of condition survey and you get a party wall agreement. And if they don't give you access, there's nothing we can do. We can't force our way in, although that might be changing shortly. We had a lot of this with COVID where people were restricting access and we couldn't get our way in. Now, this is what I talked about earlier, the 10-4 process. If there's no reply to the notices, you have to send another reminder letter. And it's called a 10-day letter, but you have to actually wait 12 days to allow for postage. And if they don't reply to this reminder letter, you need to appoint a surveyor on their behalf. And here's the point that people need to really wake up and understand this. Once you appoint a surveyor on their behalf, that position is occupied. They can't then go and appoint their own surveyor. Yeah. They can't say, I don't like the surveyor you've appointed on my behalf. I want to appoint a different surveyor. Legally, you're in the right. And then this surveyor will write to your neighbours and request access for a schedule of condition. Whether they grant him access or not, you can then go ahead and create a draft a party wall agreement and survey. And we went through. There was a project that started. You're not going to believe this. There was a project that started at 2018, and they only finished doing the build this year. It was unbelievable. And on this occasion, we'd appointed a surveyor on behalf of the building owner. The building owner had a surveyor who was very, very challenging, shall we say. And he sat there and had a 45-minute argument with me. And he said, in the end, he had to concede and say, okay, well, yeah, your appointment as that surveyor stands. And there's various stuff going on. And this would make a great case study if we ever get to writing it up. So just to close off, the fourth option, which is missing out of that documentation, is this thing about doing a 10-4 reminder letter and appointing a surveyor on their behalf. Again, that's the government booklet.
Oh.
Sorry, go on, Surinder, you got another question?
No, that's fine. I was trying to distract somebody coming in.
You were trying to wake someone up. Don't do that.
No, they were waking me up.
They were waking you up. Right. So hopefully I haven't put you to sleep by that. I'm going to go through one other diagram. So this is the basic terms which I've already gone through. This is the actual process of doing the notices. And I'm not going to try and explain it actually, but you get a project notifiable works land registry. And this is a process we go through when we draft notices. So I remember having a conversation with someone and said, what do you charge for notices? And it's either 99 or 199, depending on what it is. And with residential works, we don't need to go to site to start this off. So that's the process we go through, and it just gives you an idea of the complexity that's there. And I remember having a discussion with the headmistress, planning lady. Remind me of her name. Linda Wright. Yeah. So she said something that was very interesting. She said people try and do these templates on their own, and they can end up filling it in so it's wrong, and the planners get a whiff of it, and it sets them back 10 years. Well, it isn't so bad for the party wall process. You know, you might end up starting again, but it could set you back about 3 months' work. Yeah, and for the amount we charge, and other services, other surveyors are available, obviously. I think it might be worth you considering not, getting a quote at least. So that's just, I thought I'd bring that up and show you what goes on there. Do you have any more questions for me, Surinder?
But just about one or two, just 1 minute, give me a second, I'll just look it up. Yeah. Now, where can somebody get those templates?
Right. So I'm going to ask a favor from you, Surinder. If I forward them to you, can you make them available for our community?
Yes, we'll put it up on our website. People can download them. Yeah. Just send me PDFs.
I'll send you. They're PDF downloadable. We're going to send them out to our members. You can download them. We're going to try and do that. And I'll send you updates as we update. I've got a project this year. I'm going to update them as we go along and try and deal with this PD stuff and so forth as well.
Now, you've given us a lot of information today. What if people want, it's been a very quick overview. Where can people go and get more information about it?
Oh, I've got the perfect slide up for you. So starting from last Tuesday, and I'm going to try and do these every Tuesday, at least once a week. I'm going to do short, sharp presentations on our YouTube channel, 1996 Party Wall. That's where you find our latest content. Apart from property professionals, which we're going to try and do more content for you guys. So those are the two places to go, property professionals or our YouTube channel.
Okay, one more question.
Okay, I'll give you a special offer. You can have one more as well. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm privileged today. You mentioned something about a course you have at the moment, Party Wall course. Tell us more about it and how people can get it and what the advantages of that course.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about this earlier. So during the lockdown, I did a presentation for a group of surveyors. There were 200. It was my first Zoom training that I've done for surveyors. We had we actually had 287 surveyors. It was over two. Sorry?
That's the big one.
Yeah, I was quite astounded. I was shocked. You know, normally when I do trainings, we do them in rooms, and they're about anything from 12 to 20 people there. So we did and prior to the lockdown, I hadn't used Zoom at all. I knew it existed, but I never got to using it. You wouldn't, you can tell when sometimes I fail to unmute. So anyway, we had these 287 surveyors on, and it was I'd split the training into two sections. So it was 2 1.5 hour elements of training. It was hosted by an government organization. Paul very kindly hosted it for us. And I was going through this presentation, and all the guys kept saying, "Do you do CPD?" And I thought, I'm giving you the equivalent of a full day's training here in those 3 hours. Why do you need a CPD? But because they kept asking, I then turned this into a CPD. I actually cut the recording up and got some guys to turn it into an online program. And that's the bit I mentioned at Jeevan's challenge when we talked about initially, that I've pledged some of those to him. So if we put a link in the group, in our Facebook, you can actually get it really cheap by just making a donation to his 1 million step challenge. It gives you 3 hours worth of CPD training. If you're, and it's not only construction industry. If you're a professional in any industry, you can apply 50% of non-relevant CPD training. So it'll give you 3 hours of training. It's a set of videos with Q&A. You go through it at your own pace. You can do it on your phone, laptop, tablet, maybe even your cars these days. Just work through it at your own pace. And pace. You got videos. It explains a lot more detail of what I just went through today. Are we able to put that link up, Surinder? Is that another job, or have I overloaded?
No, but what I will do is I'll put up Jeevan's challenge, and you have details on there, don't you?
Yeah. So
yeah.
Ranjit, the Maharaja, who's with us, couldn't be with us today. His email's there. So if you make a donation, send him an email. You donate whatever you like. We just want to raise some money for this charity and hopefully share some knowledge initially. So grab it while it's on, and then once that closes, we might do a promotion with you guys, with with the property professionals, to do a discounted later on. So grab it now because it's really cheap now, but it will be available through property professionals later on if we can work out an agreement.
That's fine. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Been very enlightening. And we hope that we will come back and do a detailed presentation on one aspect of, like, the forms, what you need to do and how to fill those forms and how to serve them.
No, my pleasure. And I've got a question for you, Surinder, actually. Yeah. Do we know who we've got on property professionals next week?
It's not confirmed yet, but we should be confirmed in a day or two, and I'll put it up on Facebook.
Fantastic, if you can confirm. And just I was looking through, for all our regular viewers, switching sides for a moment, please watch Linda Wright's planning presentation. It was a really great presentation. Take your time, watch it, fantastic content. Really happy that she took the time out to do that great presentation for us.
Yes, we have that on YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, so if we can add a link to that, that'll be great.
Okay, not a problem.
Okay, so thank you for everybody. Thank you for your time. I'll see you on the other side next week. we look forward to bringing you more great content for your property journey.
And thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.